if we look at these things on a long enough timeline, this is where it is kind of interesting using the Middle East and North Africa. Bear in mind, I probably share a majority of the popular sentiment in reference to the Middle East and North Africa that what we did is we took a bunch of authoritarian pseudo-stable nations, we decapitated their leaders, and then those countries devolved into fractious civil war that killed hundreds of thousands of people. And then now, just now, a decade later, it seems like everybody is so tired that the beginnings of governance are starting to emerge. And what I mean by that is like, so for instance, with Syria, there's still massacres happening in Syria right now, but it does seem like there's a new Western-friendly leader. And then same thing.
Yeah, but bro, like, think about how insane it is. And I heard this from Richard Hanania, where he's like, he didn't use these specific words, but essentially, let's follow the Syria model. Like, Syria is one of the biggest fucking disasters ever.
Disasters for who?
At least it's one of the biggest disasters. And put that aside, the conditions
you're thinking with
totally
you're thinking with your liberal humanitarian brain, where you care about every single human being.
Hello, you cut out. So I had just said something about Syria.
Penis.
Restart everything you just said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. So say what you just said.
Okay, so you said Syria is one of the most disastrous examples that you could possibly use. And I said, disastrous for whom? Because you are thinking with your humanitarian, liberal, every life has value brain. So 500,000 people getting slaughtered over the course of a decade and a half is probably one of the worst things that you can imagine. But from a geopolitical standpoint, who was it most disastrous for in the long term?
Probably Iran and Russia.
Yeah.
In the long term.
Yeah. Like Russia lost Tardis. It lost one of its strongest allies in the Middle East and North Africa. Iran lost its back door into the Eastern Mediterranean, or one of its back doors into the Eastern Mediterranean. Like, yeah, Syria was fucked up. Nobody's saying Syria wasn't fucked up, but Syria did break our way after a decade and a half and a lot of bloodshed.
And so you think America's better off for what happened in Syria?
I think there's a
that everyone complains about.
What's that?
Refugee crisis.
Might be in the long term.
Hundreds of thousands of deaths. You can argue the rise of ISIS.
Maybe this might have been so for instance, like, hold on, let me back up and try to macro out a little bit. So we had the wars. Let me think about how to articulate this concisely.
Yeah.
It was inconceivable in the 1930s and the 1940s for us to be friends with the Germans or Japanese. And yet we had a big blowout war, and now it's inconceivable that we ever would not be friends. Right? And so the Middle East and North Africa, we've had the refugee crises, we've had the jihadist terrorism, we've had all that kind of stuff. But also through a mass influx, and now I'm getting really technocratic and sociopathic about it, but through the mass influx of refugees and Muslims into the Western world, we also are integrating them into our culture and finding the limits of our relationships with Muslims. And so the truth is that we might be better off a century from now having had these wars and having had these conflicts resolved, rather than developing parallel and separate from each other.
Okay. I think there's a couple distinctions that I would draw your attention to.
Sure.
The first is that, like, America didn't create the Syrian civil war. It was a pre-existing civil war to the same extent that Libyan had groups of there was a rebellion in Libya. It's not like America created
it could be a secondary or third consequence from the destabilization of Iraq, but yes, I agree, we were not the prime movers.
Sure, yeah. There's a level of attenuation in what occurred in Syria to start the conflict and in Libya, and it's not traceable directly to American action. The same thing, also a difference in Japan, right? Like, Japan attacked America. Germany declared war on America. America was defending itself in its involvement there. So I don't really think that you can make those analogies, or at least there's some key differences that I would note about them. And in that,
Can I hit you with something right there though?
Yeah.
Let's say that the United States had maintained its isolationist bent, and that fascist Germany had, let's say they never invaded Russia, and fascist Germany took over Western Europe, including England and Spain and all that kind of stuff. And effectively they became like state capitalist China. Okay. And so they're an economic military bloc that is stable enough to continue to function. Okay. I want to ask you a real question about this. Arguably, if Germany had just seized power uncontested and they had liquidated 12 million people, let's just say it was 12 million, 6 million Jews, 6 million Roma, gays, whatever. Okay. And then the United States had never gotten involved, and the Soviet Union was never invaded. I think the total death toll for the World War II was around like 20 million. Okay, so I could Google it.
More than that.
Well, I mean,
dead just in
I'm
World
talking
War
about
II,
combatants, but we could take a look at the stats.
Okay, got it.
But the point is that, like, if we had just
Sorry,
rolled over,
I'm dead just in the Soviet Union, I think.
well, we should Google it. We should Google it for the sake of scale. Okay.
Right, but okay. Granted that this amount of people died. Why not just let Hitler win? Is the question, right? Like, why not?
Well, right. The question is, like, do you tolerate dystopian, authoritarian, but functional and stable societies that are not killing people, or do you think that freedom is worth blood?
I think freedom is worth blood, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And if I were presented with a military strategy that I felt would be effective and sustainable and likely to achieve the desired results in liberating the Iranian people, then I might even be in favor of it. Same thing with like North Korea. Like, I'm not in principle against going to war for military reasons, or sorry, for freedom or humanitarian reasons. And I think that America, if I were in the driver's seat, I would have gotten involved in World War II sooner in the context of the invasion by Germany of Europe. So yeah, I'm like, I have no problem saying that war is sometimes justified. What I'm saying is, I don't think war is justified here. I don't think that war that we're conducting, run by the people that we're doing, it would be like putting, I don't know, like fucking Mussolini in charge and being like, well, Mussolini's going to Ethiopia to try to like spread democracy there, because really they're suffering under the king of Ethiopia, or whatever the leader is, and so that's what we're gonna do. And like, when everyone knows that's not the reason he's going into, now obviously very different. I'm just like, when you don't trust the leaders involved in an action, when you don't think the action is likely to produce the result that's being cited, these are all factors to consider. Like, America was willing, in the context of World War II, to dislodge the regime, commit the requisite forces to do so, and then rebuild it. Even in the Iraq-Afghanistan example, there was at least some desire, a significant desire, a lot of effort, a lot of mental effort, a lot of money, a lot of treasure that was ready to be committed to do the project of nation building. And
I got a super pertinent question for those examples when you're done.
Okay. Yeah, I'll end with this just to say, here there is, I think, not the same desire or the same willingness to fully commit to nation building. And you can tell by Trump's like, it's up to you guys now to rise up and do whatever. And I don't trust that that's what he wants or cares about, or that it's likely to happen. And there's going to be a bunch of collateral effects, including massive death. And obviously, and this is all just putting aside the legality question, which I think is its own problem.
Sorry. Okay. So hold on. I just had a bunch of history people spurg out in my chat. So I want to address something real quick. So the United States lost 420,000 Americans to World War II. Okay. That's the first number. The second number that I was citing was that there was approximately 20 to 25 million combatant deaths. So that's what I was referencing when I said 20 million. There was there was 6 million approximate Jews slaughtered in the Holocaust. But if you include Russian prisoners of war, Roma, gypsies, homosexuals, and political dissidents, it's estimated there's another 5.3 million. So when I said 12 million additional deaths, I was talking about the Holocaust, basically. And the Holocaust plus the mass slaughter of Russians and undesirables. And then the total deaths were 70 to 85 million deaths. So what I'm saying is, let's like cut the total deaths in half. Let's say it was 40 million in the European theater. And then let's say that the 12 million were going to happen if we let Germany take over. And then 21 million total combatant deaths are people who died in resistance. 80 million is the people who died total, and then 420,000 Americans. What I'm trying to get at with this line of questioning is these things cost blood and treasure. And so if they cost blood and treasure, what geopolitical outcomes are we willing to tolerate on the world stage to avoid death? That was the main thrust of what I was getting at. And then I'm sorry.
I think that there's some amount, but and I'm certainly not proposing that freedom isn't worth fighting and dying for, or that we should just let Hitler win or something. I think that that's like also true. People will say that about Al Qaeda too. Like, why don't you just like not anger these Islamists? I'm like, if they're attacking you, I'm going to view that very differently than someone who's not attacking you, or someone who, like, I'm not just going to say comply with all the worst people in the world just because otherwise there'll be war. Sometimes war is inevitable. Like Civil War, for example. The Civil War was more bloody in terms of American lives lost than World War II was for Americans. And notwithstanding that, I think it was justified for the Union to engage in that war. I think it was perfectly justified, even though, because it was preserving the Constitution. It really was a fight for the Union to preserve the Constitution. And I'm willing to say that that is worth hundreds of thousands of people dying. So I don't have a problem saying that. I just don't think this war is justified.
Yeah, and that's actually the main thrust of what I'm getting at, is when you so casually, because I know that I'm doing this, when you so casually dismiss 500,000 dead in Syria, people are like, you're a fucking sociopath. You're a monster. Like, how could you diminish, 500,000 dead people so easily? And part of the reason why I'm trying to do this calculation for you is, or not you, but for the chat, is we have sacrificed hundreds of thousands or millions of people on the altar of freedom or mixed economy capitalism.
Right, but before. Syria is not a wellspring of democracy. Now, maybe
not yet.
In time it will get there. Maybe in time it will get there for sure. But the different calculations there are obvious. The first is that we didn't start that civil war. The second is there was a pre-existing civil war to which other parties involved themselves in.
Well, let me ask you about Afghanistan and Iraq, because this is pertinent. Yeah. So imagine, because a lot of the people who have beefs with the war and terror, myself included, part of the reason why we're pissed is not because we did it, right? That's not why we're mad. The reason why we're mad is because we spent $2 trillion and tens of thousands of American lives. I think it's around 10,000 combatants and it's more civilian contractors. But we spent tens of thousands of lives and $2 trillion, and we have nothing to show for it. Like, Iraq is a satellite state of Iran that's dominated by the Shia. It's more stable than it was, but it's still not the friendliest with us. And then Afghanistan, I think it took 11 days for Afghanistan to fall back to the Taliban. And we spent billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in Afghanistan, and we definitely lost thousands of lives. So, if in Afghanistan, if we had killed, let's say we killed the upper echelon of the Taliban who weren't willing to hand over Osama bin Laden, just special forces drone strikes, we kill those guys. And then let's say that we hunt down Osama bin Laden. We don't have a large nation building force. We don't occupy any territory. We don't have any FOBs. We are exclusively hunting Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. We kill Osama bin Laden and we leave. Okay? Now, with the amount, and then same thing with, let's even say Iraq. Let's say we wanted to do Iraq. Let's say we killed Uday, Qusay, and Saddam, and we kill the upper echelons of the Ba'athist Party, and we say, You motherfuckers can't. You motherfuckers better normalize trade relations with your neighbors. You better never, better never fuck with your neighbors again. Better never fuck with Israel again. And we're going to dismantle all your WMDs. We're coming in. We find all the old chemical weapons that we sold to them in the 80s. We dismantle them and then we leave. And then we say, good luck. Figure that shit out. How much more treasure and blood would we have saved that wouldn't proverbially be on our hands if we had done that?
I'm not sure. That's like a counterfactual where we leave
It's a tough calculation
regime in place or whatever, and understanding, of course, that the Ba'athist regime under Saddam Hussein was a lot more one person, than the Iranian regime, which is more entrenched, more diffuse in terms of its overall, and Iran is less sectarian driven than Iraq was. Iraq is, majority Shia, run by a Sunni leader, but it's decently split. And then you have the Kurds out there. Iranian sectarianism isn't as much of a issue.
It's like 90 to 95% Shia, so the chances of a sectarian civil war are substantially lower.
Right, and so I guess I don't know how much less. I think that killing Saddam in that way might have unleashed the sectarianism that was the cause of so much death in Iraq in the first place, which is what happened.
No, it totally could have, but we wouldn't have been responsible for cleaning up the mess. We would have just said, good luck. See ya.
Right. The thing is, saying that is putting to a lie the notion that really we care about it being created into a democracy, or that we care about the freedom and well-being. I mean, it's almost fucking like disgustingly ghoulish for these people, including certain Israeli officials, to start to appeal to humanitarian impulses when it comes to Iran. Certainly, like Trump and Rubio, like these people don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. And so, in my opinion, since I don't think that they give a fuck, since they were planning on maintaining the regime, which massacred tens of thousands of people, even recently, just to have it be like a person who's more not as involved in the region. To me, it indicates that like we can't trust them to produce those results for the Iranian people, and it's just geostrategic. And if it's just geostrategic, then they're lying to us.
Yeah. I would say humanitarian concerns and democracy and all that shit is purely secondary. But I also think that we would obviously welcome if so 30,000 people allegedly were slaughtered by the regime prior to the airstrikes. So if another 50,000 or 100,000 Iranians, in concert with CIA operatives with small arms and Starlink technology, in concert with Kurdish militias in the Northwest, if they started slaughtering Iranian security forces in order to overthrow the Iranian regime in favor of a Western-friendly democratic regime, of course we would welcome that. But at the same time, if we say, hey, now's your time, guys, we're giving you airstrikes, we're blowing up their CNC, any major military Iranian assets that are on the field, we're going to blow them up. But then that revolution or that desire never formalizes. If it never formalizes, then we're just going to shrug our shoulders and walk away.
Those people aren't organized. They're not armed. There's no.
I know. That's why we needed USAID. We needed USAID under the auspices of humanitarian aid to sneak in CIA agents in order to create social media applications so revolutionaries could communicate using Starlink. But the lefties don't like USAID. They don't like the CIA using it as a backdoor, and they don't like regime change, even if it comes through the CIA with a few briefcases of a few $1 million and some small arms.
Okay, so let's take a step back. I think that the geostrategic goals are related to the ability of Iran to project strength with its ballistic missiles, its drones, and its proxies. I think that the democracy impulse or the humanitarian impulse is linked to the Iranian regime's authoritarian tendencies and its slaughter of its own people, and that we're unlikely, based on current actions in the policy, to see changes in those basic calculations. That is, Iran's threat geostrategically is inexorably tied to the fact that it's the regime, right? We talk about we obliterated their nuclear capacity last year, and
Let's be real, that was
what
probably
they
bullshit,
say
but okay,
now.
keep going.
Okay, but even assume it's true, the administration will just say tomorrow, well, they're just going to rebuild it because how they conceptualize the geostrategic threat isn't in virtue of the existing capacity, but in terms of what the desires of the regime are, which are to project strength. And the truth is, they can rebuild it, right? They can rebuild aspects of their missile capacity, which they still have, and they can rebuild. They can make more drones, and they can build more, enrichment plants and shit like that. And it doesn't take them to have this overwhelming arsenal for them to be able to project into, their neighbors. Just now, the threat of it is causing people to leave these Gulf states, Bahrain, Qatar, etc., the Emirates. So all I'm trying to say is like I don't think that the current
The
policy is going to produce the result desired.
I want you to keep consistency. I want you to keep some intellectual consistency across these things. So for instance, when we attack Iran, or if we attack Al Qaeda or Afghanistan or Iraq, then it obviously solidifies the resolve of the people we're attacking into hating us and attacking us. I think Iran attacking 17 of its neighbors, while there are going to be tourists and rich people who flee the region for fear of stability, there's also going to be resolve among those nation states that Iran is a regional threat. Because realistically, if Iran wanted to prove that Israel and the United States are the threats here, they should have exclusively attacked Israeli and United States military installations, but they didn't do that. I've seen Shahed drones and ballistic missiles striking civilian areas and commercial airports in the
Yeah, I mean
Emirates, in
yeah, I mean,
Saudi.
they're violating international law. They're targeting civilians on some shit. Like,
Right.
no doubt,
So
Iran
so
is
hold
violating.
the through line though, because if the through line is that us attacking our enemies solidifies their resolve against us, how has Iran not just simply built an anti-Iranian regime coalition out of the entirety of the Gulf states and its neighbors, who up until now might have said, oh, well, this is like, I don't like Iran, but I don't hate them either, and this is the US and Israel's beef, and I'm going to stay out of it.
So I do agree that there was like a kind of de-escalation in terms of the Gulf rivalry with Iran, and so I do think that this might change the disposition towards Iran. I think already the Gulf states never like loved the regime. I don't think that they were supportive of this action from the administration, and I think that they want it to stop. I think that if they could have it their way, they would just bring Iran back to the negotiating table, which I think is also uh, possibly what Trump wants, or some, in a given day, that's what he says he'll want, and then it's a unconditional surrender. I think it can be very like his brain can be very chaotic and um, capricious and changeable. But yeah, I don't know that they're going to be willing to dedicate troops to go into Iran.
We won't.
They're already offering. They were already working hand in glove with the Americans when it comes to mutual defense, sharing intel, military bases, and so what
And that's
additional
probably
thing have we
solidified.
gotten from this? I think it's pretty solid. The relationship between Trump, his administration,
And
and the
Saudi.
Gulf states is it's very corrupt, but B, they're very like meshed together, and there was already like a good understanding between these groups of people. So I just like don't know like what additional thing we got. Yeah, they already don't like the regime. They probably want this to end as soon as possible.
Well, okay, so hold on. What we got is we got solidified allies against Iran, I don't know. Anyways, we got solidified allies against those people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, as an example, nobody liked Saddam Hussein, okay? In the 1990s, nobody liked Saddam Hussein. But the HW, Bush Sr., allegedly he went to the Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all that kind of stuff, back when we got Kuwait. And he said, hey, like, we should overthrow Saddam because he's a problem. He's a regional problem. He's going to attack you guys. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. He's got WMDs that we sold to him in the 1980s, blah, 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 blah. And it was actually the Arab states who said it's unconscionable to have a kafir, like a non-Muslim military force, come in and depose an Arab Muslim leader. So even though, yes, he's a thorn in our side, he's a pain in the ass, he's going to attack us in the future, et cetera, you cannot send hundreds of thousands of troops into Iraq and depose him immediately because that's going to destabilize the region. So that's why we went for sanctions in the 1990s instead of invasion. Well, it seems like I would expect a similar instinct to it, like exist in the Gulf states in reference to deposing the Iranian regime. And I almost guarantee you at this point, they don't give a fuck. They probably don't give a fuck because ballistic missiles and drones are raining down on their house. So whatever sympathy they had for the Iranian regime being isolated against the American geopolitical strategic interest is probably gone.
I don't think they ever had much sympathy for Iran. I think they view, first of all, the religious authorities there view the Shia Muslims who run Iran as, like, in some sense heretical, just based on the long-standing religious differences there. But even putting that aside, like, I don't think that they were ever aligned with Iran. They were very,
weren't, but they might have been more neutral or more forgiving.
Okay, but the only way in which they're relevant is the extent to which they pressure America, pressure Israel, and are the receiving end of Iran trying to make the war painful, costly, and difficult. And so whether, like, their disposition, do we really care whether or not the Gulf states back a regime change in Iran?
Yeah. Or it's a long-term goal. This has been a goal for decades, and it'll probably be a goal until it happens.
They're all like autocratic states, Connor. Like, they're a kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Friend,
they're emirates. These are not.
You must learn.
Who gives a fuck? They don't care about democracy or humanitarian shit. These are like fucked up regimes.
My friend, my beloved friend in Pisco. Number one, you can care about multiple things at one time. You can also care about things to different varying degrees. You can be pragmatic and you can be ideological simultaneously. So, for instance, I would see the MSB, the new crown prince of Saudi Arabia. I would view him as a Saturday morning cartoon villain because he got Kamal Khashoggi or whatever that guy's name was, invited him to an embassy, sent out a hit squad, and then chopped him up and then removed his body, in suitcases because he was critical of the Saudi regime, right? That's some Saturday morning cartoon villain soprano shit, right? But he's also ruled as a pragmatist, where a lot of like the social reforms and tourist reforms and allowing more Western culture in and increasing trade with the Western world, he's been a pragmatist the way that his father wasn't, in ways that will maybe not turn Saudi Arabia into a democracy, but will modernize it as a state to the point that it's Western friendly.
Yeah, potentially, but like, if that's the assessment, then I think you have to grant that Iran is more democratic than Saudi Arabia.
It probably is. But at the same time, democracy is, we already know democracy is not the virtue, because there is a difference between, if you're an autocratic regime, but you are our enemy, we are going to kill you. If you're an autocratic regime and you're our friend, we'll support you or we'll kill you, depending on how advantageous it is to us.
That's why I'm suggesting that the humanitarian stuff, like, it's all pretext, and like, maybe the people who support the war aren't lying about it, but the people who are conducting the war, I think, don't give a fuck, and they're not committed. But to I think the benefit for the Iranian people.
I think you think there's a hypocrisy when there isn't one. Okay, so for instance, I'll try to articulate it for myself. I have a community member, and I'm not going to say their name, or I'll say a modification of their name. Their name is Kaz. Okay, they live in Iran. They're a secularist. They're pro-democracy. They're pro-West. They speak English. Okay. They had friends who were a part of the Iranian protests. And right before the protests kicked off, he said, "Hey guys, it's getting bad. If you don't see me for a month, it's because some crazy shit popped off. And if you don't see me ever again, it's because I'm dead." Okay. That's what he told us, like, the week that the protests kicked off. His best friends, a friend specific, I should be specific, got killed in the protests. And so we kind of mourned it as a community. We talked about it as a community. We hoped that the regime would change, blah, 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 blah. But, okay, I want democracy for Khazra. I want a civil society for Khazra. I want it for his family. I want it for his friends. I want it for the future of the region. However, if we could get Iran to normalize trade, not go to war with its neighbors. They'll probably still support terrorist organizations, but let's say they reduce their support for terrorist organizations, and then they open up their oil markets to the Western world. And we can't get a democratic revolution, and that's all we can get. That's still a victory. That's still a win.
Okay, but if it could be achieved through a treaty or an agreement or through diplomacy, that's preferable. But if it's the case that this is unlikely to achieve that aim, I think it's by definition a failure with respect to the stated war aim. And
It might be, but
again,
can I remind you of a historical
yeah,
analog? This quote gets used against Abraham Lincoln all the time. But do you remember Abraham Lincoln saying that if he had to permit slavery in the South, but he could preserve the Union, he would do so?
yes,
And that's used as like a moral indictment against Abraham Lincoln, that the war was never truly about slavery.
um,
I think you're doing the
well,
same
use
thing
it
in
that
reference to
way.
democracy, in reference to the Middle East and North Africa.
No, 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 no,
I
no,
think it is. I think it's the same. I think it's a balance of pragmatics
not the
versus
same.
ideology.
No, because for Lincoln, it was about preserving the Union. The reason that the Civil War is about slavery is because that's why the Confederates were seceding. That's why it's about slavery. But Lincoln, I think, was honest when he said he wasn't going to touch slavery where it existed when he was inaugurated. And so I think Lincoln was honest about his desire to, and I think they even proposed amendments to that effect.
Yeah.
So like there's no lie there, and it doesn't make people wrong that saying it was about slavery and that that's why they were seceding. But for the North, the immediate concern, the most imminent concern, was preserving the Constitution and the Union. So all of that is consistent. I don't see how it's contrary
No,
to what I'm saying here.
but I
Here,
think that if you make this analogous to the Middle East and North Africa, our primary concern can be geostrategic advantage, long-term geostrategic stability, preventing Iran from getting a bomb, and getting Iranian leadership that isn't openly hostile and antagonistic to the Gulf states, Israel, and the United States, and is willing to sell us oil. That can be the primary goal. And then the secondary goal can be long-term regime change and democracy within Iran. And just because we betray democracy in the short term for our primary goals doesn't mean that we don't care about democracy at all.
I think that potentially that could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It's possible it happens. I don't have no reason to think it's likely. I am just as much like sure, like I'm just as sure that this will, to the extent that we're unable to accomplish the immediate goal, it might just resolve the Iranians that they need to get a bomb, and that they do it as soon as possible. Like, so assume that like Trump is unsuccessful and they aren't able to achieve their aim. Well, maybe what you've done now is you provoked them to stay entrenched. Now, my hope is that that's not the case, and that diplomacy can win the day, and they would wait, and the Iranians would be entertaining negotiations with a new administration or something. But I think that there's a danger here that's not recognized, that it worsens, the situation geostrategically.
Worsens
But
for
maybe we have
who?
just a new reconcile for the American Western perspective.
How?
I don't know how this is in our interest, because I think that we're more likely to achieve a a compliant regime in the long term by um, pushing for negotiations and a softening of the regime through soft power and through internal checks. I mean, there was internal protests and stuff and internal dissent that we've kind of like swept the rug under them by killing the supreme leader. And now, there could be a rally around the flag effect that strengthens and emboldens the regime. And I think that, like, think about the South Korean example, right? The South Korean example, the Chile example, these are situations in which there was a dictatorship in Spain, right? That over decades it softened, right? And they gave up power, etc. It's not clear to me that this conduct is going to result in a wellspring of democracy, humanitarian concerns,
You're
and it
right.
might have the opposite effect.
You're right. Let me bring up a counterexample though.
Okay.
So China, during the 70s and the 80s, I think we started normalizing relations with China in 1974. And as a result, we were hoping and praying that what would happen is through economic liberalization and diplomatic liberalization, there would also be cultural and political liberalization. So over time, China would just become increasingly democratic and increasingly normal from our perspective, less and less autocratic over time. Well, what ended up happening, though, is that China, through industrialization, became one of the major manufacturing hubs of the world. And because they had a centralized economy that liberalized insofar as allowing different areas to generate wealth, but it was still centralized enough that whenever it became a threat to the state, they could nationalize it or punish it or incarcerate leaders of industry or whatever. What we did is we effectively allowed, in my mind, a fascist regime to have an economic powerhouse underneath it. And so as a result, the chances of destabilizing and winning a ideological conflict against China, I don't think is increasing. I think it's decreasing. I think China can
Certainly, if
increasingly.
we're using all of our ordnance and missile whatever defense systems, if we're using all that ammunition here, I think that that's true. But also, if
Well,
you're saying
well,
like
I'm not even
just
just
letting
talking
them
about
be,
conventional
but are
warfare. I'm also talking about ideology. Because why would China or the Chinese people, if they can point to incredible amounts of material wealth generated, if they can point to competitive technology with the Western world, if they can point to arguably having better criminal and educational outcomes within their society than the Western world, why would they want to emulate us? They're doing it better.
well, I think you and I would have our preferences for why China's model is not desirable, notwithstanding economic gains or something. You're saying how are you going to convince them if they have good results? I think that there's definitely an argument that um, it may that like our hopes regarding liberalization in China were dashed because it just kind of entrenched them or whatever. But does that mean that we should have gone to war with China?
No,
I don't know that
no.
that's what like
I
you know what
I
I'm talking about.
don't know the calculation. So for instance, I think part of the calculation for the Nixon administration for the normalization of China was to politically isolate Russia so that our pressure campaign against them would be more effective. And I don't know I don't know the effects of that. Like if I had to normalize relations with China, but that also accelerated the collapse of the Soviet Union, do you accept that? And then also, this is the other calculation. Part of the reason why I asked you about how much blood are you willing to trade for freedom is because freedom is very ephemeral, whereas blood is very measurable. And so, for instance, with China, they don't, they arguably have less crime and less violence than the United States. But the Hong Kong protesters were clamped down on, destroyed utterly by the central government. The Falun Gong cult or church, those people are extremely persecuted in China. They're effectively incarcerated on site. The Uyghur Muslims of Western China endured a cultural genocide, and we did nothing about it. And then there's arguments that the Chinese effectively are using their incarcerated population for vital organ harvesting. And this is reported on by the UN. So, like who's to
Yeah, but then
say if we
you have the
tolerated the
models in the
Iranian
Gulf, right? Like,
regime and normalized them, they don't become worse because they're more economically
aren't we
stable.
empowering MBS by continuing these economic ties, trying to normalize between them and Israel? Aren't we empowering all these Gulf states, which are incredibly illiberal, that
They're allies. That's the
are
difference.
that's but the point I'm trying to say is in the context, then what's driving everything, right, isn't a belief or desire in the well-being or like democratic impulse of these people yearning to be free. That's not what's actually motivating it. And who knows whether or not this is the best way to get that. It also could not. I don't think there's a good case, like a good percentage chance, or that we can ascertain a good percentage chance that it will result in that outcome. Maybe there's a good percentage chance that it'll degrade and I think that it's already happening, the military capability of Iran, et cetera, whatever. But that just as easily like lead to a hardening of resolve towards the very ends that we think are unacceptable, namely the accumulation of ballistic missiles, funding of proxies, and pursuit of nuclear weapons. And so, to me, when all of those things are up in the air and there's no real strong basis to believe, and even some intelligence reports from internal to the administration that suggest that it's not likely to see this kind of result, and you have people who consistently said that this is a bad idea, JD Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, within the administration, who are now doing an about face without an explanation, to me suggests that it's not clear. It's a gamble. It's a risk. It's a huge risk and gamble, and I don't have any confidence that it will come up good. And that's compounding all the issues of competency from the Trump administration and illegality. And in the context of an unclear gamble, where there's massive risks domestically, think about like the biggest concerns of the American people: prices, right? This is going to not be good for the stabilization of prices and regional stability too. This is arguably empowering Russia by increasing the price of energy. So all of this needs to be taken into consideration. Maybe this gives Russia an additional push to keep pushing in Ukraine at the expense of the EU and shit. So
Yeah.
all I'm trying to say is a massive gamble for people I don't trust, who are corrupt, who suck, and who are doing illegal shit. I'm not going to support that.
Yes, and you shouldn't. So one of the things that was brought up in chat that I want to address, because apparently people are telling me that it's being brought up in your chat as well. And then I have like a mean position, but I 70% believe it. So I'll tell you that in a moment. So what I need to explain is, a lot of people are saying the United States is a net oil exporter. So we have enough for our domestic consumption, and we're also selling it overseas. So why is this in our national interest to try to secure Iranian oil or whatever? And my point to you is that the United States, through our actions as world police, we are the security forces for 70% of global trade. The people who are outside of our commercial empire are Russia, China, Iran, and Venezuela. And so as a result of swapping out the leaders for Venezuela for somebody who's more friendly to us, we effectively did a smaller version of what we're trying to do in Iran. By doing the strikes in Iran, well, ideally, I almost guarantee you, if we could have done a Venezuela in Iran where we swap out leaders and they're still dictatorial dickheads, but they give us what we want diplomatically, we would have done it. And then Russia and China are harder to play because they're such strong economic and military powers that it's not as easy to just go in there and switch leaders. So we're effectively trying to isolate Russia and China. But I want to make a point to what you said, which you're saying, this is a huge gamble. There's no guarantee of success. The chances of us making things worse are just as high as our chances of success. You don't trust the discipline, the diplomacy, the intelligence, the competence.
And one other key thing that we haven't talked about, elephant in the room.
Illegality.
No. But even putting that aside.
Yeah. I have my meme answer, but I want to hear what you say first.
I think Israel needs to be reined in, and we haven't been talking about that.
Sure.
Like, this is emboldening religious nut jobs in Israel, expansionist nut jobs in Israel, to steal additional land, to exercise unjustified control in the region. And again, they're going to use the cover of this, to continue to assert interest contrary to stability in the region. And I think that we need to start talking about the malign influence that I think Israel has on our internal domestic politics.
I'm so happy you brought this up. It leans up with my meme answer.
Yeah, go for it.
So what I was going to say is, clearly if Iran was taken out and all the Gulf states were silent about Israel's expansion into Gaza in the West Bank, then I would expect over the next century, Israel to slowly, effectively expand. Like, the West Bank will become Israeli and Gaza will become Israeli, and it'll just be like a slow ethnic displacement over the next century. But my meme answer, because you were like, who does this benefit? Like, it doesn't benefit the American people. Prices are going up. You know, the Gulf states are taking a huge hit, blah, 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 blah. My meme joke and answer is that this is a temporary distraction from the Epstein files. Like it actually it
Oh,
is.
that's cope.
You
That's
you
cope,
can think
man.
it's cope, but I
This
swear to
is
God,
some lib
we've been
shit.
talking about
This is some lib shit.
why.
I think it's cope because I think it's cope because this is part of Benjamin
It
Netanyahu's
goes into your
desires
Israeli thing, by the way, too, but I want to
for
hear what you have to
decades.
say.
No, no, I think it's cope because I don't think that we've seen like smoking gun evidence that suggests that there's a a nexus with trying to cover up specific things related to Israel. I haven't seen that yet, so we're going off an assumption.
You're jumping ahead of me. I don't even think that might have been implied, by what I said, but I don't think I said that.
Okay. So then, even putting that aside, the notion that Trump would engage in this action to distract from the Epstein files, I think he, the pusher for this policy, has been Netanyahu since the start of the Trump administration, and maybe Trump is acquiescing to it because in his mind it's to distract from the Epstein files or whatever. But I doubt that that's the main driving point because does he really think that that's going to be the result?
Oh,
If anything, it's going to
probably
heighten the
neocon
mania.
warhawks. It's probably neocon
Yeah, so
warhawks who wanted to
I,
do this
I just
anyways.
I have no basis to believe that this was actually motivating the administration, um, especially because it would be stupid to assume it. Right? This is just going to further intensify people's beliefs, sometimes unjustified beliefs, that there is a connection. And so I just don't think that there's a basis to believe that that's what was going on in his mind, especially since he's been lobbied on this very issue since the start, even before the massive blow up of the Epstein file stuff.
Hold on a second. Okay, what makes you sad? Question mark. Okay.
Chat like
Sorry, I have a routine chatter who is sad that I said that Trump was potentially distracting from the Epstein files. And by the way, I said it was 70% a meme position, but it's still a position that I partially hold. So anyways, let me articulate it the way to which I partially hold it, but I do want to hear K's why this makes her sad, and then I want to articulate the actual steelman of it. So basically, I think that the Epstein files, regardless of foreign involvement, I didn't even mention foreign involvement. Y'all are inferring foreign involvement before I even say it. The Epstein files are effectively a intel connected guy running a sex trafficking ring of teenage and underage girls for decades, receiving a slap on the wrist from the federal government, and then Trump being closely affiliated with that, and then that coming back to haunt him. That's the closest to the assertion that I can make that's factual. Now, when it comes to the speculative portion of this, though, I think that this is an albatross, along with an anemic economy that's being hurt by tariffs. I think that the Epstein files, the cover-up of the Epstein files, and the shitty economy are anchors around the Trump administration's neck. And so as a result, a geostrategic war that is both moral and economic is a distraction in the zeitgeist from a shitty economy and from the Epstein files. And I think that if you look at...
Really? You think that that's how you calculated it? Because think about it, like right now...
Well, Grenada was exactly this. So hold on, just indulge me another couple of sentences. Yeah. So Reagan was flexing nuts about how the military industrial complex was kicking ass and taking names. But then the Beirut, Lebanon barracks bombing killed 300 troops, and the United States didn't have any desire to double down in Lebanon, so we withdrew. So Reagan knew he looked like a pussy, and he needed a distraction from the fact that he was a pussy in Lebanon. So what happened was like the Grenadian military junta took over. And so in order to flex nuts and put positive spin in the news about his administration, he unilaterally, without the consent of Congress, intervened in Grenada so he could get positive press. So yeah, I think a neoconservative airstrike war in the Middle East and North Africa could be used to distract from the economy and from the Epstein scandal.
Okay, I mean, it could be used that way. And I perhaps that Trump's domestic woes are on his mind, and they were like the Epstein files are included in that. And I'm sure that's domestic considerations are often at play in Netanyahu's, I don't know, decision matrix as well. I'm guessing. I just don't think that this is like. I think if you remove the Epstein files, this thing still happens. I don't think it's like a maybe it's motivated him. I don't think this strike is about that. I think the strike is by and large about um, geostrategic and Israeli interests.
Yeah.
That's what
No,
I think is the
I think
motivation.
I think even if I was correct that let's say that Israeli Mossad had videotapes of Donald Trump doing bad stuff and use that as leverage in order to have him do this. Or if they don't, I think the thrust, the primary motivation of this action is geostrategic balance of power shit. So it kind of
Right,
doesn't
but
matter.
I think people who imply, and this includes leftists and liberals, that he's just doing this because he's being blackmailed or something. I'm not saying that you're saying that, but there are people who do that, and I think that's letting Trump off the hook almost.
It
It's
probably
a weird
is.
thing to say, right? But it's like letting
No,
him
it
off the hook
is.
and like removing his agency, where like these people are agents and they've made these decisions, and I think that they would have made them in the absence of the like domestic fervor over the Epstein files.
Yeah. No. So I think part of the reason why I brought it up as a meme position is because regardless of whether or not I believe it, it doesn't really impact the scenario at all. What impacts the scenario is whether or not this geostrategic gamble, and I think we both agree that it's a gamble, whether or not it plays out for worse or for better, and then also whether or not we as a republic have the stones to reel in the executive in reference to its war powers. Those are like the two crucial talking points emanating from this conflict. Epstein
Yeah, so
blackmail
why don't
is nothing. It's window dressing.
yeah, like I'm just like not convinced of the maximalist positions of the Epstein files just yet. I'm just gonna be honest with that. Like
You don't have to be.
I'm like convinced that Epstein definitely trafficked minors to himself and with in a conspiracy with Ghislaine Maxwell. But I don't have the evidence that it goes, massively beyond that, the criminality that is. Obviously the relationships are very troubling and the nature of the
That's the
connections I
part.
think is a lot of
That's the
smoke.
point that I was going to hit you
Um,
with. So there
yeah.
is a video essay. It's only 20 minutes. Strongly recommend you take a look at it, and you with your critical brain try to poke holes in it. But effectively, Chris Cappy, who's a military veteran, I'm saying this in a mean way, but I really don't mean it in a mean way. I don't think he's brilliant. I think he's a brilliant researcher. I think he's really good at finding things and putting stuff together in a narrative. But effectively, he went over the 1980s contacts between the British military industrial complex, Jeffrey Epstein, Saudi Arabia, the Iran Contra affair, and American intel representatives who were friendly with Epstein. And so he doesn't even talk about the child sex trafficking. He actually exclusively talks about Epstein's ties to the intel community in the 1980s and
Intelligence stuff.
1990s. But basically, for me, it if it's true that he had all these connections in reference to the Iran Contra affair and the British military industrial complex and the Saudi kingdom, what it looks like is a very connected person who had worked with intel agencies in the past, got a slap on the wrist because he was a really connected person who knew where a few dead bodies were buried. That's what it looks like.
Well, I'm in the position that they should release all the files. That's been my position. I think that definitely the administration is covering shit up. I think that that's just like trivially, obviously true. They're lying, and so that's all very suspicious. And I just don't focus on this for this conflict because I think the conflict is explained with things other than that and would have occurred. It's kind of like serial and escalating from Trump's first term. The killing of Soleimani, the Abraham Accords, the maximalists, the ripping up of the JCPOA, the like maximum sanctions policy against Iran, all that stuff I think is sufficient to explain that this guy is a war hawk, and he's always been a war hawk. And the people who were bought into the narratives that Trump was a dove are fucking assholes or naive. People like Greenwald pushing this, Dave Smith, um, Tulsi Gabbard, everyone who was claiming that Trump was dovish, just like was a total mark. And that's why, like, when people try to be like, "Oh my god, he betrayed MAGA," I'm like,
Nah.
this dude was clear about where he stood on Iran, and it was so fucking obvious. And you guys bought into like cheap campaign rhetoric that was at odds with how he ran administration and his other statements where he made it clear that he was going to be hawkish with Iran.
That's actually true, that you don't even need pedophile conspiracy theories and blackmail to just look at the alignment of political factions
Right.
that have worked in Trump administration 1 and Trump administration 2, and it's sufficient to explain it. So for instance, like the Adelsons are large donors to the Trump administration. They're hawkish Zionists. Bibi Netanyahu and Trump have had a close relationship. I'm pretty sure Israel and Bibi Netanyahu were massive critics of the JCPOA and the pseudo-normalization of diplomatic relations with Iran, because they viewed it as the United States tying its hands behind its back instead of maintaining a war hawkish position in reference to Iran. So they hated it. So them backing the repeal of the JCPOA and them backing Trump being a hawk in the region, the Trump administration backing the Gazan conflict on Israel's side thoroughly. I think you're just fundamentally correct that anybody who thought that Trump was going to be a dove in reference to the Middle East and North Africa, they were listening to what he was saying, but they weren't paying attention to what he was doing in Trump 1 or Trump 2.
So on the Epstein files stuff, like maybe he's thinking about that, but I just think that anyone who thinks critically about this action, it's obviously going to intensify the Epstein stuff, not going to diminish it. And so that's why I'm like, he did this stuff in spite of, I'm sorry, my intuition, I can't prove this, right? My intuition is more that this is done for other reasons. This is done because
it could be just because he likes Jews.
Ideologically.
It seriously could just be he's a tepid Zionist who supports the state of Israel, and he likes Jared. Maybe he just really likes his son-in-law. Maybe he just really likes Jared Kushner, and he wants Jared Kushner to do well. There are so many things that are explanatory besides sexual blackmail that you don't need sexual blackmail to explain this.
And I want to be clear also, I think that the Democrats should get some sort of IG or special counsel to investigate why they made a charging decision or lack of further development on the specific claims against Trump, where they had this woman, it might be Katie Johnson, it might be someone else, specifically accused Trump, and to find out what Trump knew when. I think that's all fair game to look into it. I'm not saying that Trump definitely didn't do anything. I want to be clear about that either. I'm just saying I haven't yet seen corroborating smoking gun proof that would convince me to say, like, I know that he's criminally implicated here. I think that there's plenty of suspicious shit, and there's a cover-up for sure, but I don't know what the extent of his involvement is in the criminal aspects of what happened.
Yeah, that's it. Sure. Sorry for dragging you along with me into the conspiracy territory, but I enjoy speculating on conspiracy theory bullshit more than most people. Real quick though, I'm going to shill again because it's been a while. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage your chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Listen, if you guys reward me financially when I'm having good faith, interesting, highfalutin conversations with intelligent people, then I'm going to keep doing that. More. Whereas if you give me hundreds or thousands of dollars when we're reviewing the sexual activities of random YouTubers, then I'm going to go where the money is. So like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them, if you actually enjoy geopolitics and legal analysis from people who aren't screaming at each other.
So let's finish with this in terms of next steps. I think next steps have to be, from a Democratic perspective, reading the room and recognizing that their base is very much against this war. And they need to get with the program to the extent that they're not already. And I'm happy that the overwhelming majority, both in the House and the Senate, voted in favor of the War Powers Resolution. But this war, I think, is going to turn out to be unpopular. And I want the Democrats to operate as a bulwark in holding the administration accountable. If the only thing they can do is have hearings and haul people in to testify, then that's what the fuck you need to do. And so that's what I support. I'm against the war. And I would hope that you would be against it for the constitutional principle. But I'll let you marinate with that after our discussion.
Yeah, so while it sounds like I am arguing from a consequentialist lens that this could have a positive effect, I will concede openly to Pisco and critics of the war that is just as likely, if not more likely, to be a blood-soaked nightmare that destabilizes the region and screws shit up both economically, socially, militarily, etc. And I also do not trust the people who are running this conflict to not devolve into insanity. So that's already conceded. What I would also say is, as much as I might be cheering on neoconservative, pro-democratic, international military interventionist outcomes, the truth is that I'm voting for somebody else's bloodshed. It's very easy to do so from the comforts of America on a podcast than it is to actually fight these conflicts and risk dying in these conflicts. Not just that, but even if we were to get ideal, let's say that we got every single neoconservative concession. Let's say Iran becomes a bastion of democracy. They're exporting their oil to the free world. They turn on, Russia and China, and they help pressure them into a more Western mixed economy, capitalism, liberal, democratic framework. I get everything I want. I still agree with Pisco that it should be a priority for Democrats to, number one, win 26 in a sweeping manner. Number two, win the presidency in number 28 or in 28. Number three, pass sweeping reforms that in reference to pardon power, in FARA violations and foreign influence campaigns and bribery and corruption by nuking the filibuster in 28 and then passing this legislation in order to, number one, safeguard our republic, and number two, reel in the broad military authority that presidents have been abusing arguably for decades, arguably since the inception of this country, because effectively we have taken such a big risk. If Iran was everything they said that it was, and they had a nuclear bomb and they deployed it, they could have done a dirty bomb in Tel Aviv. They could have done a dirty bomb in New York. They could have done a dirty bomb or a nuke in Tel Aviv. They could have done a nuke in New York. They could have actually fucked up the world and killed hundreds of thousands of people and launched World War III. That should not be left up to the whims of one man. That should especially not be left up to the whims of one man who is an incompetent piece of shit who I hate, who I cannot wait to be out of office.
You're here on that. And with that, Connor, I think that was a good conversation. Yeah, bro. How you feeling?
I feel great. We should mix it up. We should have BDSM struggle session, fight sessions where we scream at each other and it's all ugly until the very end. Then we should have some calm, nuanced, legalistic, geopolitical, analytical conversations. And then every now and then we should jump on a panel and throw elbows. So yeah, I think variety is the spice of life, and I appreciate the variety.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you. Hope you're well. My best to your fam.
Thanks.
And to grandma points. And yeah, go with
I appreciate it. I'll give you I'll give mama points and grandma points and little points as the love.
Are you even a Christian?
I'm not. I don't believe that Christ is the Messiah, but I believe in God.
Wow. Interesting.
So I'm a deist, like many of our founding fathers.
Well, go with the nondescript God.
Yes.
And hope that you have a wonderful
I will go with the ordered and creative force of the universe, who may or may not care about my specific existence. I will do that.
Thanks. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye, buddy.